Welcome to the RAG Podcast, the weekly show where I interview recruitment owners who are prepared to tell their unique story of growth. This is all in aid of helping future and existing recruitment businesses who are looking to do similar things. Now, growth means different things to different people. So, by tuning in every week, you're no doubt going to find information that's relevant to you.
Welcome back to another episode of the RAG Podcast. On this week's show, I'm joined by Kyle Winterbottom. Kyle is the CEO and founder of Ambition, which is a specialist recruitment business in the data and analytics space. This is the third time Kyle's been on the show, and he's been a customer of mine since 2020. Kyle last time came on the show to talk about how he built a business that was driving 7 figures from his personal brand on LinkedIn. Since 2022, we've been working together, and he's built a community now which consists of over 1,500 chief data officers around the world that generates 7 figures. All of his revenue comes from within this community, and it's adding significant value both externally to the market but also to the business, as he's been approached on multiple occasions to acquire the business and the community. So in this episode, we talk about Driven by Data, what it is, why he set it up, what he actually does to deliver it, and why, if you're seriously thinking about building a business that's sustainable and has value attached, then your marketing and sales strategy should be something that is long-term sustainable and adds value to the market. So for anyone thinking, I want to build a brand that drives inbound business, this is the episode for you. Without further ado, Kyle, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much.
Third
Third time lucky.
It is.
Maybe.
First time in person, though.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And we've both gone with, we just looked at the video of the last episode. Our hair was very different.
Well,
my quiff was
you had the
sporty.
quiff and I had the quiff.
Yeah.
No,
Neither got a quiff.
no, there is no quiff.
I know. Do you think yours will come back?
It could do, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think watching that, I'm tempted to get mine back now, just thinking, fucking hell, looks all right.
Yeah, I mean, whether it'll grow back's a different story. It could do.
Yours looks thicker than mine. I don't think you need to worry. Well, mate, look, thanks for coming to London. You know, we both come down from the north to be here. For anyone who don't know you, we always start with the same bit. Just give us that like really high level bird's eye, 30-second overview of the business, and then we'll go into the detail.
Yep. So Kyle Winterbottom, founder of Ambition Group. We basically do data analytics, headquartered in Manchester. Most of our work is London. Do a bit of work into Europe, a bit of work into the US. We basically work at the senior search level of the data analytics ecosystem. So building, high level search mandates, the leadership teams that sit beneath them, and then the kind of mid to senior level technical teams that kind of report into those people more on a project basis. So we don't do kind of contingent recruitment.
4.5 years old.
Yeah, September 2020.
I remember it. Because you, like you say, you joined our bootcamp in month 1, which was bold. And I remember thinking, you're gonna smash this, but I didn't realise how quick things were going to take off. And that was a time where the market just did rocket, didn't it? It went off well. So, yeah. Does it feel like it's gone quick?
Depends what day you ask me, mate. Yes and no. Like I think it's obviously 4.5 years that has gone quick in that sense. But I think when you think. I think back to that time, it does feel like a long time.
And there's phases to your business that you're like, fuck, did we do that? When was that? Because we're 8 years old in March now, which is like, wow. And yeah, there's like been so many iterations of Hoxo. I'm so glad they're behind me, most of them. I mean it. Like I said it on a previous episode the other day that some moments I look back and I cringe and I'm like, did we really say or do that? But we are where we are. Yeah. So. If we go back to where we finished the previous episode, not that I'm assuming people have listened, but we got you on at the start of the journey in 2020. You were less than 6 months old. We got you on again in 2022. At which point you'd moved to a city centre office in Manchester, which I've been to. You had 10 employees. The brand was doing 7 figures in revenue from mainly LinkedIn, and this Driven by Data community and podcast was starting to kick off, which we discussed back in the day was a really clever play. But if you cast your mind back to that time, what was happening, and let's go on a journey to today.
So where were we? 2022. So obviously, 21 and 22, right, were probably the best years.
Boom years, yeah.
I mean, I'd be surprised if we get anything like that again in our lifetime,
Yeah.
right? I think we were at a place as a business where we were probably too immature, too infant to kind of really take advantage of it because we were still small. But we hung on to the coattails of it, right? And we did really well through that period. And because nearly all of our business comes inbound to us, I guess the volume of work and projects were coming in at a rate of knots because the market was really good. We had, in hindsight, it was the wrong decision to make the moves that we made, but equally we kind of had to make them. I think.
Which was what?
We had to grow to kind of deliver projects. We were at a point where we were relatively infant as a business, and these projects were coming in, and it was a case of get stuff filled, get projects boxed off. Money hits the bank, we can reinvest to grow, and basically that's what we did. I think we roll into 2023, and because the market naturally took a bit of a dip, and I think the long and short of it is really the reality is that the business today still does exactly the same as it did then.
Yeah.
We've just less fundamentally. And I say this to everybody. I find it really interesting, right? Because you speak to anybody in the recruitment sector, advisors, NEDs, whatever, and everyone will tell you, other business owners, they'll all tell you, don't make these mistakes. I made these mistakes. And yet I've probably walked into every single one of those mistakes, which was, trying to grow too quickly, keeping people too long, not making decisions quick enough, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, 20 kind of got towards the end of 23. And we'd had, probably jump into this a bit later, but we'd had a few kind of knocks on the door about acquisition. And that coincided with me really in my gut knowing that structurally we were just set up wrong. It was me as the face of the business, the content and the community was driving all the work inbound to us. We obviously had the marketing bit as the engine.
Yeah.
But then everything sat behind me was just delivery. So as soon as the market dips a little bit, the frequency of the inbound work slows and the size of the projects that are coming in lowers, which obviously is...
And you got this
kind of
imbalance at the back end.
Imbalance at the back end of where you've got, effectively quite a big delivery team for such a small business that at the peak, they couldn't keep up. There was too much work. Then you get into a position of, the peaks and troughs with it being project-led, of, too much work, not enough work, too much work, not enough work. So you have this kind of productivity problem of, someone sat there with a project of 15 hires to fill on their own. Well, that's not sustainable. Yeah. The next thing, that project finishes and they're sat there with one role, and you're kind of like... So,
and the pressure's on you then to find everything.
Yeah, because again, we'd never really built, rightly or wrongly, and many people have criticised me and will criticise me, no doubt. But it sounds glamorous to sit here and say we have 100% inbound. That's the reality, but it has caused us a lot of challenges, right? For sure. As good as it might be to have that model that drives inbound work, the consistency of pipeline has effectively been a challenge for us in terms of how we scale, what that model looks like, what the right structure is. Made a load of mistakes, wasted a load of money. That's probably caused inaction on my part as to where do we go next, why do we go that direction, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, really. So we're sitting here now, early 25. 2024, in all honesty, mate, was supposed to be a year for us kind of stabilising the business, recalibrating and growing. And for one reason or another, that didn't transpire. So we had a really good year in 2024. But, before I knew it, it was summer. And I was like, Q4, I'll do something about this. And then before I knew it, it was kind of December.
But what if we go back a step?
Yeah.
You were at 10 at one point. How did you trim that right back to what?
To basically 4. Yeah. Because it was just, it was all delivery. And when it was working until it wasn't.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't. And as I said, that coincided with some interest from other firms that were looking to acquire to effectively buy into this market, right? Which very selfishly for me, I was also thinking that, if we were to do anything, then it needs to be as lean and as profitable as possible. So those two kind of worlds collided at a similar time. So I made that decision. And then, 2020.
But that also meant, I remember we had a chat, but it meant that because the inbound work was there, but you're not as precious. Like the pressure's not on to just chase it when you've got a lower cost base, right? So you could actually slow things down a little bit. You could
100%.
still deliver, make money, make profit, but you're not under the that you're not looking at your cost base thinking, fuck, we've got 3 weeks of a month to break even or whatever. Yeah. You're already there pretty much with one 100%. Day. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's different facets to the business now, right? In terms of like the commercialization piece of the community, which I'm sure we'll get into. But effectively 24, obviously we had a lot less people, so we did less money, but we were more profitable, right? Yeah. Like you'd expect, I guess.
So what? When it got down to 4, what does the structure look like? And what does everyone, or has everyone been doing? Like, how would you break that down?
So basically, again, not too dissimilar. It's just that the delivery capability is, not as big as it was effectively. So there's me on the front end that does, to be honest, mate, I spend most of my time in that community and on the content that supports that community, and that drives relationships, which leads to work fundamentally. Then we've
got a marketeer next to you.
Yeah.
Community manager / marketeer.
Yeah.
And then is it 2 in delivery behind you?
1 currently now, yeah.
Right.
One of the others is off on maternity.
Right. So it's actually 3 now.
3.
Yeah. And that relationship between you and the delivery consultant, how much are you still involved in the process once the role's signed off? And like you're going to do the sale to get the retainer in or whatever. Do they take ownership of it, or is it... Yeah, they deal with the client and everything.
Yeah, pretty much the whole process from there on out. Obviously, I get involved as and where I need to, and it depends on the size of the project. If we're in some team builds that are quite quite large in scale, then obviously I'm probably more involved in that stuff. Where it's single search mandates, I'm less involved.
Do you have to? Does she need to benchmark candidates off you and that kind of stuff, or is she at a level now where you
very self-sufficient now?
Yeah.
So she's been with us for over 3 years. So and as you'd expect, over time, the reliance on me gets thinner and thinner. She knows what good looks like, and so all that stuff's pretty good.
I'm going to say I think that the model you've got, I think, is a dream for most people. I think, it's not the scale and exit story that maybe a lot of people are chasing, but there's so many people that obviously a lot of them come to Hoxo is like they're on their own or they're a small business. They have 0 inbound. They have no brand. They've got relationships, but they feel like they're on this fucking outbound treadmill all the time. And they're doing everyone's doing 360. Everyone's running around. There's no ownership of things, and it's chaotic, and it's really chaotic. Whereas you've actually, you've trimmed it down, but now you've got to a point where there's like a really clear line between what everyone does. And there's only 3 people. So one's doing like the tactical marketing engine. One's your content creation and selling, and someone else's delivery, right? Yeah. So that I don't blame you for not rocking the boat over the last 6 months once you got that rolling, because that must be. You mentioned like the bit of PTSD of hiring, like that must be a nice feeling to say, I'm just not doing that for a bit. I'm just going to enjoy what I've got and make profit.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it wasn't the intention. Like the plan was to early 24, right? Let's have a strong Q1. And then we'll just go again. And I think I'd mentioned PTSD to a number of people, and I think it's like anything. As we've gone on this journey, you start to learn things pretty quickly about what works, what doesn't, and our business and the model that we have is so different that I think it just needs a completely different view of it. But I think, in all honesty, my challenge has been, what is that? So I've sought advice off a lot of people, and because there's not loads of people that have done kind of what we're trying to do or have the similar type of model, everyone has an opinion and everyone has a perspective, but it's often conflicting, which then for me, I'm like, I'm getting, this angle, this angle. It's all different advice. I don't want to get this wrong again. So that in all honesty, that has caused inaction. But we're at a place now where obviously we stabilised the business, and we're now basically about to go again.
So what's the monthly revenue been as a team of 3? What have you been consistently doing?
Again, mate, it depends on the peaks and troughs of the projects. It's largely perm. It's probably 90% perm. There's a bit of recurring revenue off from a pure contract perspective, off like a handful of runners that come out of those existing relationships. Again, it can, it's been as good as 200 grand months to 50, 60 grand months.
What would you say if you flatline an average? What would you say the average has been?
70, 80k.
Yeah, so it's about £1 million.
Give or take.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Depends how you look at it, mate. Well, yeah,
I think
it's all right. Yeah,
I think that's amazing. Like, I think I've got a viewpoint you haven't got on the sector, right? I meet people every single day, and I think 80% of our industry is desperate to do what you're doing, and they're not. They're small. They're doing, six figures, multiple six figures, but they're burnt out. There's no structure. There's no like ownership of parts of the process. There's no brand. There's no inbound, and they don't feel like there's certainly no community attached to it. There's no value in it.
Well, you always want what you don't have.
Yeah.
Right?
So everyone does. But I think it's important to look and just think, look where we started and where we are, and then look where we want to be, instead of always measuring against where you want to be, because it's bad for your brain. It's bad for your health.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, mate. It was always intended to be a business of a certain size. It was never for us about having 100 people, 500 people. No. That wasn't the driver, but it was always supposed to be bigger than 3 or 4 people, which it was at one point, right?
Yeah. And
then when you're at that point, you've got all them stresses when things aren't necessarily going as well as you were hoping, and there's a slight downturn and what have you. You're kind of like, wouldn't it be nice just to be sat there with 3 people and there's enough inbound work that you never even have to worry about about anything?
Yeah.
But when you've lived in that world then for 12 months, I'll be honest, I found myself sat there going, it's a bit boring.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a bit bored by this now. Like, we need to kind of kick on, really. So, yeah.
So what we'll kind of do this a bit backward. We'll talk about where do you want to go, and then let's work out. I want to get into this driven by data stuff, the community you've built, because I think it plays into what we've done together and what I 100% believe in as a model. But where do you want to? Where is 2025 going for you, do you think?
So I think for me, I definitely in relation to the business that we have and our type of model, I personally think the recruitment landscape's shifting. Like I see a world where you go to like a more traditional sales, if you're thinking about having a sales team, as it were, rather than just having, X amount of 360s, I think there's a world where it's almost a image of, in some way, shape or form, of like a SaaS business, right? So there's like SDRs, AEs, make it more funnel-based, effectively. So that's what we're looking at as part of our business. Now, there are a couple of markets that sit outside of what we would call as our core community that we operate in or should operate in, that are kind of intrinsically linked, but the hiring manager, as an example, might not be identical to that community piece. In those situations, we'll probably just bring in some senior people to own that as its own little thing, but that'll be the kind of the exception, not the rule.
Yeah.
And then the big driver for us is going to be kind of doubling down on this community stuff. Really.
But if we start with the people bit, what you said before, I think is the problem was the ratios of you and the back end. So now you've got 1-on-1, it works really well. You go 1 to 10, and then straight away you've got to feed 10 people. The pressure's there. So if you look at the future, are you seeing like you say AESDR, whatever, and a back end delivery? Do you see more of a balanced model in terms of the amount on both sides? Because you need to get enough work to justify the back end. Like, it can't just be one or the other.
It's. I've said this to a million people. I feel like now, mate. It's the consistency of that front end. Like, inbound is great. It sounds glamorous. It's and you talk all the time about it's the holy grail and that's what people want. But I kind of feel like we've gotten to a place where it should be supplemented by more traditional activity.
Yeah.
How you approach that probably slightly different, but it's that consistency at the front end, because that's been the thing. Given the nature of the work that we do, being kind of project led, it's those peaks and troughs that have made it really hard for us as a business to kind of scale in the right way, and we made the mistakes of scaling in the wrong way previously. So if you think about if we can fix that, the consistency of that front end sales kind of funnel and engine, and therefore have more visibility of what that pipeline looks like. Because that's the thing, if I'm being really honest at the minute, January we could have 10 inbound projects come through our door, and then I'm like, right, well, who's filling all this? My hand's then forced, right? So we've turned loads of work away on the basis that, do we want it? Yes. But do I want to get dragged into this place where I've got to go and hire 3 or 4 delivery people to fulfill this project? And when that project's gone, then I'm left with 3 or 4 delivery people that might not have enough to do. So we're fixing that kind of front end sales piece. And many people I've spoken to for advice, mate, talk about it being, like champagne problems and and stuff like that, which from the outside looking in, it might be that, but when you live in it, it's kind of not. It's
the way I look at it is, though, it's baby steps to a goal. So like throwing too many people in based on demand it's a recipe for disaster. But one salesperson, one delivery person, like you and the girl you've got, that's you've almost got a ready-made little function there that can work. It's like a 1-360, but in 2 people that should be able to produce more than. Yeah. You don't want 2 people doing one person's job, but 2 people doing close to 500,000 to 1 million. That's fucking mega. But there's one person who's responsible for one part. One person, and again, the way your business is built, I guarantee there'll be a flow that will overflow. So then you're going to need to think about that replication. But of all the people I've seen, it's about steps.
Yeah, and it's, as I said before, it's the consistency of that front end. So if we know that, okay, you're not relying upon inbound and or me all the time to convert it, and there are other people uncovering opportunities and moving that opportunity along the funnel and the pipeline towards more opportunities potentially being converted, then you've got more faith that, okay, we can go and hire however many people we need on the back end, because there's always going to be enough stream of work, which is the problem at the minute that we have, is that that's not the case, right? Because sometimes it's a massive peak, sometimes it's a bit of a lull. So so that's I think that's the order of the day.
That's the big challenge. So let's go back to the community then. Driven by data. It's not the first thing is it's not called Orbition the community, right? And this is something I talk about a lot. Like, I don't think you should necessarily brand your podcast or your events or whatever, just your company name. Where did the whole concept for Driven by Data come from for you, and what was the reason you felt like it would make sense?
I guess without treading over too much old ground, but obviously I'd started doing events and podcasting before I started Orbition. So for me, that was always going to be the vehicle. The Driven by Data brand, I just wanted something that existed outside of the walls of Orbition, so that the lines weren't blurred and it can kind of have its own identity and its own brand. So it started out as Driven by Data, the podcast. The events that we were doing, that I was doing anyway, we kind of rebranded to that. So it became Driven by Data, the insert whatever pillar of that community becomes now. And that's kind of where we've gotten to with it. So it kind of, podcast, events, mentorship program, magazine, and then there's a whole host of kind of content related pieces that fall off the back of that kind of sit under that umbrella, basically. What
was the value to the people being a guest and the value to the people listening when you first set up the pod?
That's a good question. Well, I think, look, first of all, people like to talk about themselves, right? Especially at the leadership level. I mean, that podcast now, mate, we're into season 5, so we're over 200 episodes. That's been like the thing that's really catapulted our brand digitally, because it's the thing that's easiest to kind of push, right? So it's very senior people from massive brands, and I think I'm probably fortunate that the data analytics community that we serve is very open to giving back. Like, it's quite, in comparison to other business functions, it's quite immature. So there is this kind of camaraderie of let's share, let's do this together, which really was the whole purpose of the Driven by Data community.
I think you mentioned to me as well was about, and when we discussed early on, you said data is not a tech function, but it's seen as a tech function. So like this whole Driven by Data was actually, how do we get data professionals to be on the board of businesses talking business? Because data does provide business decisions, right? But lots of businesses just see them as techies. Mm-hmm. And has that been a common thread throughout the events and community?
Well, I mean, go and look at most of my posts, mate, and 5 out of the 7 posts a week will be around that topic. But yeah, in essence, I guess, if we're operating at the senior end of the market, right? And so the real driver, in all honesty, for me is kind of how do we improve. Ironic, because it's quite similar to recruitment in that sense. How do we improve the perception of the industry?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of businesses that are very frustrated with, we've invested X amount of tens of millions into this whole data thing and we've had no value from it.
We don't know what it's giving us.
And there's a whole raft of things around that, but it's those kind of things that pull it together. So our events, you bring 60 chief data officers into a room. They're talking about topics like this, and it's all about sharing knowledge and ideas and what's working and what's not, and kind of just trying to shine the spotlight on the examples of where things are going well, so that people can learn from each other. And I think that, in all honesty, that's one of the big drivers for me, is just how can we as Orbition become the kind of facilitator of that connection and that knowledge and blah blah blah. So for a long time we were self-funding like all of the events that we were spending tens of thousands of pounds, probably close to hundreds of thousands of pounds a year on hosting this stuff, just so that people in that kind of ecosystem can get value from it.
So this is the bit that I think people don't understand, which I think you naturally are like me in the way that you think, right? Putting your own money in the first place, putting people in a room, putting people on a podcast, putting people, reading magazines, whatever, you've got a purpose that's bigger than placements.
100%.
You're not going in with every day talking about recruitment.
No.
You're talking about the challenges talent have and all the rest of it, but you are going to monetize that through placements, right? So you've got the ability as a leader to take a podcast guest or someone you've done a fireside chat with or someone who's at a meetup. You've got the ability to take them on a journey, and you'll naturally position yourself as a recruiter of choice by being in the room and by the way you interact, right?
Yeah. I know we've had this conversation before, and I think where people get this wrong is they think that by doing the content and doing all these elements that the direct result is placements. The placements are a byproduct of building trust and credibility. Yeah. So like if you're putting content out there that resonates, that gets loads of engagements, because if you look at my content, there's always a thread back to the implication of talent has on whatever I'm talking about, but it's always about the challenge of the industry, not specifically through the lens of talent. So that then automatically brings quite a lot of engagement, and it brings a lot of trust and credibility. People are like, this guy obviously knows his stuff, because I'm not talking about just like
interview techniques
or salary surveys or stuff that everyone else would be doing. So I think it gives me a leg up in that respect, that people look at me and go, he obviously knows the challenges, and obviously that then just becomes, it gets kind of multiplied. The more podcast episodes you do, the more events it just compounds, right? Because you're in these rooms, hearing these conversations, you're privy to the challenges, you're privy to the things that you possibly shouldn't be privy to, actually, in some instances, right? So all of that then compounds. The result is trust, credibility. This guy knows his stuff. He talks sense. Sometimes not everyone will agree with that, but and then the byproduct of that is, Kyle, we've really struggled with this. We've gone through internal talent. We've gone through the PSL. And then that's where the inbound work comes from.
You take a look. I remember when you sent me a WhatsApp, I think it was early 2023, and you were like, I've just got a 200K team move or team build project referred by a client I've never even spoke to. So a business that you didn't know referred another business that you didn't know, who've come inbound with it, and it's 200K's worth of retained work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That would not be possible without these initiatives. Like, it's impossible.
Yeah. I think, and one of the things, for us that we've really pushed on is trying to remove me as the bottleneck to this stuff, because I think that's important. And initially, it was very much, it was the Kyle brand was bigger than the Orbition brand. Mm-hmm. And we've done a lot of work in that space. So, we just picked up a retained search now off the back of someone that is in our mentorship program that I don't know, I've never spoken to, who's referred us to someone that they know through some other channel, and that's good, right? Because it's not like a lot of the time it's a direct relationship with me, or they see my content, but it's becoming more of an Orbition thing now than a Kyle
and
thing.
the community is talking to each other, right?
100%. Yeah.
A message from today's episode sponsor, Untapped. Untapped are the market leader and go-to agency for finding and hiring elite offshore talent into the UK, US, and Australian-based recruitment agency market. Now, I don't partner with sponsors I don't believe in myself, and Untapped are someone I've personally used to build the team at Hoxo, and it's been a game changer. No one else we've worked with can compete with both the quality of the network and the time to hire, and the impact they've had on our business has been insane. From hiring, from consulting, from advice, they're a premium team that you can trust, and you're guaranteed to access a network of top-tier international talent that could be right for your business. Look, they interview over 3,000 candidates and put them through a 4-stage interview online every single month, and they only represent the top 1%. So you're going to get a thorough service at speed. So if you're looking at international hiring where you're looking at getting up to 70% less in terms of cost for equivalent UK member of staff in both recruitment and back office roles, then it's a complete no-brainer. All right, you're going to love it. So they are currently showing a waiting list for their next cohort of hiring, and it's almost full. If you'd like to join the waiting list, then click on the link in the show notes and take it from there. Good luck. So how many meetups a year did you do in that? Like, podcast what was the volume of both in the first, like, when you to get it off the ground?
So the podcast weekly. It's always been weekly.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're into the 5th season. So 209 episodes or something now. The events that we do are quarterly, and again, they were all always self-funded.
Are they always face to face, in person?
Face to face.
Do some remote digital.
We did some, obviously, because when we launched it was COVID, right? So we were locked down for the best part of that first 12 months. But yeah, it's always face to face. So we get kind of 50 to 60 chief data officers in a room. It's only been 2024 where we've kind of commercialized that side of the business. So yeah, they were quarterly. We do LinkedIn Lives probably once a month. Again, now we have kind of vendors or consulting firms, whatever, that because of what we've built in terms of the amount of eyes and ears that we get on our stuff on a monthly basis. You know, we're now selling things like LinkedIn Lives, so companies are paying for us to host a LinkedIn Live. Same for like sponsorship of magazines. So some of it's even become kind of campaign led, where they might say, well, we'll sponsor the podcast, we'll sponsor the next event, and can we write an article in the magazine as an example, or can you do a research report and we'll sponsor that, and so on and so forth. So, and again, it's, you know, that, if I'm honest, that wasn't intentional. That's just that's kind of coming down to us as well because of the caliber of this community that we've built. People come knocking saying, like, have you ever thought about letting someone pay you to have access to it? Which for a long time I was very much against. I mean, from the first season of the podcast, I started to get approaches by some fairly sizable firms asking, you know, would you take sponsorship for this? And at that point in time, I was just like, I don't think we've built enough credibility and trust here. My worry was that by having sponsors in at that stage, you start to turn people off getting involved. Whereas now it's so big and so established and so credible that people just understand, okay, there will be a sponsor because, you know, it costs a shit ton of money to do this stuff, right? So, so yeah, that's kind of.
I waited 18 months to get a sponsor for the rag, and again, I had a few early approaches. It just didn't feel right. It was like, nah. But then I've always had a rule that, like, I've got to believe in the sponsor. I've got to like the people I'm dealing with. I don't just take money. You know, I've got the people that work with the podcast today. I really like working with it. I believe in them. They've done things for us. Like, it's just the money isn't that important from sponsorship for me. Like, I think you can demand some major money, because we talked last night and you're saying there's a potential this year now to, like, almost double revenue. So you got your recruitment brand, but then you can almost double revenue through your sponsorship and event strategy, which tell us a bit more about what's possible there.
Well, to be honest with you, mate, I mean, we could double down in that space and go and intentionally, do more stuff, which was, to be honest, was always the plan anyway, right? Because if you think about our business model, it kind of feeds off each other. So the more stuff we do in that space, it just means the more interaction and time we have with these people, which in turn means more work on the back end through inbound business. So it kind of drives that, but also, you know, the amount of inbound stuff we get now through vendors or consulting firms that are saying to us, like, how do we get access to this? but then every business has their own drivers, right? So like really big, as an example, really big businesses, they don't need brand awareness. Whereas smaller businesses, they might come and say, well, we'll sponsor the podcast because we just want people to know who we are, because they don't know who we are.
Yeah.
If, I don't know, if you're a big four consulting firm, for example, well, everyone knows who they are. So what they really want is, well, how do we get on the inside of that room, and can you maybe create something for us that's
Do they not
bespoke?
know the CEOs of these businesses or chief officers of these businesses already though?
Yeah, but to be honest, mate, it's hard to do, right? And it's been something that we've not really thought about. There's nothing stopping any business in the world doing this, apart from the fact that it takes a lot of time, effort, consistency,
That's
and
the key word.
determination. Right, that's the
key word you just said. I was thinking about it. Like, what has separated you from other people in the last, since we've met in 5 years? It's your consistency is the one, and I think that's my superpower. Is I'm not that good at anything individually, but I'm good at doing things consistently well over time. And most people, especially in recruitment, like we said before, people have always gone out and done lunches and breakfast meetings and round tables. Like, that's not new.
No.
2013, I was running around London, doing like a breakfast at the Don with like 5 leaders of insurance companies. But there was no brand attached. There was no follow-up. There was no consistency. It was one thing that you did once. And there was a conversation, a really painful conversation 2 weeks later, where someone's going, what did we get out of that? How many roles do we get? And you're like, that might be the first time I met that guy, and he's a CTO of a fucking insurance company. And they're like, we're not doing that again then, so just get back. There was no there was no vision. And that's, in a way, I said it on a few podcasts, I'm actually quite glad in a way that the industry is dominated by people who think that way, because it gives people like us a chance to really fucking stand out. Because if everyone thought like you, there'd be hundreds and hundreds of these communities in data, because there's hundreds of agencies in data, but most people won't consistently do it, and they won't put the money in.
No. And it's also I keep using the word like trust and credibility, but that's fundamentally what it comes down to, rightly or wrongly. All of these people that come to our events, they're the next day they're not getting hammered on the phone, like trying to sell them something. Don't get me wrong, we need to do a lot better in that space and figuring out how do we leverage that more.
That's the next phase, to be more on top of it.
100%. Right? But fundamentally, it's like we want people to come because they get a load of value from being there, and you've just got to, I think this is the part of the issue, I think, with our industry, is that it's the almost the instant gratification of doing anything.
Yeah.
And I used to host events for other businesses before I started the business, and the conversations were the same, right?
Yeah.
It's all right, we've put $2,000 behind the bar to have this happy hour thing, and it's like, how many jobs have we got from that? And they're asking you at like 9 o'clock the next morning, and it's like, well, we can go on that follow-up journey of trying to get business from them. What's the likelihood of them wanting to come back and stay engaged? I'll be honest, I reckon most of the people in our community are probably scratching their heads as to why I've not called them. To be fair, but as I said, that's part of the.
I think that's the next phase, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the next phase. If you were to predict over that period of time the money that you've made, or the percentage of your revenue that's come from the community, like, what would it be?
Almost all of it.
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't think we've ever won any business that's come from something that's been outbound. Definitely not outbound that's been cold. It might be, I've messaged someone on LinkedIn or WhatsApp if I've seen something that's transpired into a conversation. But even that's minimal. Most of it is genuine inbound. Kyle, we need to do this. Come into a conversation, see how you can help us. The majority of those relationships come from that community.
And even if they've not been to one of your events, they'll reference a podcast or a magazine or something they've seen you on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or then it comes direct from LinkedIn content. We've had a few big wins directly from that. So I think this was probably 2022. We got like $150,000 project to like hire 5 people of a guy that I wasn't connected to, who said, I see your stuff on LinkedIn all the time. We think the same way. We should work together. That's what that transpired. So he wasn't in the community. I didn't know him, wasn't connected with him. Obviously, we get a lot of referral-based stuff now through that. So, yeah.
To me, it's the conversation, and this is the bit that people, unless they've done what we've done, they're not going to get. But it's the first conversation with someone is so different when you've done all the work.
Oh yeah,
because they know you, or they think they know you, and they're already 80% of the way there.
Yeah.
And like, there's none of that. Like, if I look at all my best customers I've worked with over the last 4 or 5 years, they'd all say the same thing, that there's no convincing needed from most of my work. Like people have already got 50 to 80% of the way there they want to work with me. It's more just then about the finer details.
Yeah.
And it's the same. Like I don't actually get involved in sales for Hoxo at all unless it's, so we've got 2 products. We've got the bootcamp, we've got the boardroom. You've done both. Bootcamp is our like volume flagship product where all over the world we've had 600 agencies. We're bringing in 15, 20 new customers every single month. I don't get anywhere near that anymore. I used to do it all, but I don't get anywhere near it. But my brand does, and the Hoxo content engine and the community gets 80% of the work done before they even meet a salesperson.
Yeah.
So,
and this has been part of the issue when we've thought about the structure of the business and that kind of sales funnel piece, is that it's really hard, even when we brought people into the business to do sales, and we've tried it, and in all honesty, it failed miserably, is that when people come to me, like they've already made up their mind. Like they know who I am. They're approaching me for a reason. They've probably already tried, internally, gone through the PSL. So they're already, like, I get on there, and it's like, they're more or less ready to buy, right? Yeah. So that conversion, that's a totally different game than having to get on the phone to someone, explain who you are, what you do, uncover the need, all that type of stuff.
And that's the bit where I think you've probably got a bit numb to, but sometimes it's important to reflect on, because I get like that, where you're like, fuck, whatever. You find you see all the problems in your business, but that's the bit that I think most people would jump, like the way they call you you say you got a champagne problem. That's the bit that most people dream will never get to.
No. Well, I think there's a couple of things here, right? So someone described, I was speaking to someone for a bit of advice, and they described analogy of they were like, you're like a really rich person that's been chauffeured around forever, and now you've got to drive yourself and you don't know how. And I was like, that's fucking true, actually. Yeah. So there's that, but the second piece for us, I think, where the opportunity lies, is that if anyone comes into our business, it's going to be unlikely that anyone that they reach out to, even if it is on an outbound basis, that then they're going to know who Orbition is. They're going to know who I am. Yeah. They're going to know the value, hopefully, that we create in the industry. So that's a completely different game. But that's why my advice, and I get a lot of people come to me saying, I see that you do this podcast, I see you have this community, like, people from the recruitment industry that want to know. And my advice is always the same, like, unless you're going to view this as a long-term strategy, don't bother. Like, if you think you're just going to put an event on that's going to cost you $5,000 and you're going to win $100,000 worth of business from it, you're not, because it takes time to build that trust and credibility that then the work will come to you, or you can build a foundation where, people know who you are. It makes it easier for you to leverage.
So why I started the boardroom was because of the way obviously LinkedIn was the foundational layer for both of us to do what we've done. But actually, where your money's made is when it comes off LinkedIn and it's in your ecosystem. When it's in your event or your system or your WhatsApp groups or your Slack channels or whatever. And it's about, I think you've got 3 levels. You've got CRM, where no one speaks to each other and they're in your database. And that used to be the USP that recruitment owners had. Then it was like, we've got LinkedIn, and, I think LinkedIn Recruiter is what people think is the USP, and it isn't. Building your brand on LinkedIn, having the connections, the followers, and the reach, that's the USP. But you're still competing with every other fucking recruiter and everyone in the world. So there's the thing in the middle, and that's what I think you're doing, and that's where the boardroom exists. Is like, I want to work with, and I only want to work with people that, based on what you just said, where they can project 12, 18, 24 months when they're like, I want to build that middle layer. I want to put the right people from both CRM and LinkedIn into a place where we're going to put our arms around, we're going to nurture them, we're going to meet them physically, we're going to spend time with them, we're going to get them to speak to each other. Yeah. Because I reckon 90% of the beauty of your community is at an event is chief data officers dealing with each other.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
You don't even have to speak sometimes, and they'll get the value from each other.
Yeah.
So
I say it's about being the facilitator of that knowledge and that connection, right? So, like, an example would be at our event, I host it, as in terms of I've got the mic, I thank everyone for coming, I do housekeeping rules, I explain what the itinerary is going to be, but fundamentally it's for them, often designed by them. So, like, the topics have been voted for by them. There'll be 5 or 6 tables with 10 people on each table. Each table will have a chairperson from industry. So it's like, it's never about us.
No.
We just bring everyone together, and it's kind of the same for everything we do, really. You know, it's like we are just the projection of the thoughts of the people. We are the medium by which people can communicate with each other. It's fundamentally how we try to look at it. But I think it definitely needs to be a long-term. It's a long-term play. Like, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind. Could we have set up with 10 360 recruiters and gone, right, let's go with what I know. Like, you know, I was S3 born and bred, right? Let's go with what I know. Would we have made more money? Would we have made more money to date? Probably.
Yeah.
In fact, not probably. Almost 100% sure of that.
Yeah.
Year 5 to 10, will we make more money if we get the next bit of the journey right in terms of structure and people by doing what we've done? 100%.
How much do you think community adds value to the business from an external acquisitions perspective?
Well, so this, when was it? So the first approach that we had about acquisition was, I want to say October 23. Since then, we've had 8 approaches. 7 have been like pure, let us buy you. One of them's been, let us put money in to help you scale and grow. 4 of those 8 have been from recruitment firms, some big brands that people know, some more boutique type businesses. And the other 4, so 3 and the investor, have come from the data analytics industry. So like consulting firms that operate in our space, or suppliers to that ecosystem. Now the reality is, and I've said this to everyone, I don't mind sharing, like the perception of our business is probably bigger than the reality.
Yeah.
Right. So when people come and have a look at it, they go, oh yeah, you know, nice, decent little business. Is it blowing anyone's socks off? You know, what if we bought this? Is it going to materialistically change what they have? Probably not. From a recruitment perspective, probably not that much, right? Obviously, there's relationships, there's clients, there's contractors, there's all the stuff, but really, how much is that worth without me being there to drive it, right?
Yeah.
What they want, in all honesty, is that community that we've built. Like, because they know, in all candidness, they can leverage that better than we can.
Yeah.
Because they've got the time, the resources, the presence, the blah, 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 whatever you want to call it, right? So in almost every instance, it's like, yeah, we want to buy you, but we want to buy you to come on the inside of our business and continue to do what you're doing, so that we can leverage that community
To sell more
more of it, to sell more of whatever they do. So if they're a recruitment business, to sell more recruitment services. If they're a data consulting business, to sell more consulting services. If they're an education provider, to sell more data education services. And I think that the crux of it is...
The reality is that once you build an audience, you can drop in different products. The audience is the core. Like that business I mentioned the other day was the ones that do the hot sauce. So they get celebrities on in America. Yeah. They eat chicken wings in sauce and they chat and they have a laugh, and, like, you know, Logan Paul's on it and all these people. They've just sold for 82 million. There's like a handful of people in the business, but you're like, why the fuck have people paying 82 million for that little YouTube channel? But it's not. It's a global audience of hundreds of millions of people watching, and what they've been able to do is keep dropping products in that sell like fumph. Yeah. Because they've got this loyal audience that buy into that brand, and then you can just keep monetizing it in different ways. And I think, again, I don't think you even realize how well you've done in that respect, that you've built this audience through a podcast and a meetup. That's all it was, really. And now you're able to make, you got recruitment fees going in, you got sponsorship, you got deals for the pod, you got deals for the events. You know, there's potential acquisition opportunities. Like, you're monetizing in multiple ways. You're not actually as reliant on the placements as other businesses. You know, your purpose is bigger than placements. Yeah. And you've actually built value in something that someone would say your business isn't that valuable because it's just you. But it isn't just you. It's the audience.
100%.
And Kyle is attached for a period, but someone good enough could take that community on. So over a period of time.
Someone explained it really well to me, or like kind of distilled it down to a few points. And it's like, you know, there's a lot of recruitment businesses now that are trying to build like proprietary tech, because they know if there's something bigger than the recruitment business, because let's be honest, you can sell a recruitment, don't get me wrong, there's been some massive recruitment deals, right? But actually, unless you get to a certain size and scale, what you're buying is a list of contacts, some customers, and the people, right? Yeah. But what we've built in the community is kind of that proprietary tech piece. There's something else that is monetizable for whoever might want to.
But you've not had to build software, though.
No. No, so we've had no.
Because a lot of people do.
doing
They spend all this money on an app, and then Google releases something that blows it out of the fucking water.
Yeah.
You know, all these AI apps and stuff. It's just ChatGPT is already there. Like you need 2025, 6. We're going to see a lot of applications and Google Chromes and things built on top of AI.
Yeah.
So they'll be using ChatGPT, but with an interface that solves a specific problem for a very specific customer.
Yeah.
That's clever. But spending all your money on software of proprietary tech, I think there's a lot of wasted. Like, how many recruitment companies are trying to build marketplaces to automate the processes? And I'm like, I haven't seen any of the agencies get it right.
Yeah, well, in theory, you can get a much bigger multiplier if you can classify yourself as a tech business, right? So I think that's the driver. But I guess we've got something similar, obviously not to the same scale, but in terms of something that is tangible that sits outside of just the recruitment business that is valuable. I guess.
Have you kept yours to London or UK then, pretty much in terms of the events and everything? Have you gone?
We've done a couple overseas, but again, that's I guess the model for us is that once we get it right internally as it relates to people and structure, then I'm confident we can pick up and go and land anywhere and replicate. So on the podcast we've had loads of people from the US and people from Europe. So that because that's easier to facilitate.
Have you had any of them fly in for events or anything?
Quite a few people. Yeah, quite a few people will fly in, and quite a lot of them are asking, when are you going to do one in New York or Chicago? Or...
But again, you got a young family. Like this year, I've got my London event for the boardroom, where clients from America and the UK and Dubai will come. I'm going to Sydney to do an event there with the Asia Pac clients, and then I'm going to Qatar in October to try and bring everyone together because it's one flight. So, but I don't think I can do Sydney every year as well as those two with a young family and all that. I just don't think it's possible. Yeah. So have you thought about that, like the next phase of the community, and how do you think you've got the scope to go to these, places all over the world, or what do you?
Well, I think we've got people in the business now and probably a strategy around how we're going to approach this that will probably mean it's not wholly reliant upon me being the face of it. And I think that's going to be a good thing, especially as we move into new territories. Like, it's hard for me to not be the face of it in the UK now because it's been quite established, and whereas in the US things like events aren't. We've done some, but it's not as prevalent, it's not as consistent. So there'll be opportunity for other people to kind of maybe front that up a little bit more. For sure, yeah. But I think that if there's one key message here, and I say this to a lot of people, like you mentioned before about it being the purpose being bigger than placements. Like, I think if anyone wants to go down this kind of community route, it's yes, all right, it'll give you relationships. Yes, the byproduct of that will be that you will win work. But if that's the only driver, then don't do it, because there's so much time and effort and money that goes into it. Like, now, in all honesty, my full-time job on a weekly basis is basically being in that community, the content, the marketing, the stuff that comes out of that, which is why we're now.
But you enjoy it though, right?
Oh yeah, enjoy it. But don't look at it. We're 4.5 years in, so and don't get me wrong, I know that we've done quite well in terms of what we've built, but like, I'm super passionate actually about the value that people get from it and kind of improving our industry as a thing. Like, that's the driver. Because if it was just can we get jobs off this, there's a lot easier ways and less less expensive ways of doing it, really.
Yeah, I still think, I don't know, I think again, I'm biased because that's how I see the world, but I'm like, if I'm a recruitment business owner and I want a long-term valuable business, then I should be putting long-term and value into my strategy, because they're the two things that everyone wants. They want a sustainable business that has value attached. That's what everyone wants. You're not selling anything without those two things. So your strategy from a sales perspective, from a market perspective, should be sustainable and valuable.
But how many recruitment companies do you know that think and have a strategy like that?
Only the ones I deal with. Literally, I attract those people, and everyone who thinks I'm an arsehole online is not those people, and I'm quite happy with that.
Well, it's because it's the industry by its very nature has been born and bred and trained on short-termism.
Yeah.
Right. It's like what
can we achieve today?
What's the input today, and what's the output and outcome today?
But then again, if you just focus on the long term and you shit at the recruitment bit and the sales bit, you ain't going to make any money either. And I always say, looking at the LinkedIn stuff we did together and you've took to another level, there's plenty of people that are brilliant on LinkedIn who make no money.
Yeah.
I know them, and I'm not going to name them. There's loads. I'm not even going to get into teaching you the recruitment bit. I don't want to go down that route. I hope you've got that, and I hope S3 taught you that, and all that. Like, I don't give a I just doesn't interest me. But without that, one without the other doesn't work.
No,
and
of course it can.
Just sales on its own, you can make money. Just market on its own, you won't. But the combination of most recruitment business owners I know have had a good pedigree of training. They've come through an S3 or wherever. They know how to recruit, and it's the ones who think, right, I've got those skills on lockdown. If I can build sustainable and valuable relationships, and I can brand it and I can own it, I know I've got the skills below it to sell. That's the I think that's the perfect future-proof business. I really do.
Yeah. Well, when I started out, and I've said this for many years, right? My strength was always put me in front of someone or get me on the phone with someone. I don't know, I can do some damage. It was all of the shit that come before it that got to that point that was a bit tiresome for me, in all honesty. So the mechanism of, is there ways to engage with the community that adds value to that community, but also allows me to have, to be there in front of them, FaceTime with them, easy to engage, etc. Then that makes sense, right? I think I probably am a little bit ignorant to the fact that there's definitely a wavelength that goes on in my brain that I connect the dots probably without thinking too much about it.
Yeah, same.
But yeah, I don't know. It's a tricky one, mate. But I do genuinely believe that, if this is being driven purely to win work, eventually people will get tired and bored of it.
Yeah, that is a great point. So, final question then. You talked about 2025 as a year to, build the team that is in a way that's going to mirror it's got to mirror what's worked so far and just do more of the same. And again, on the community side, it's doing more and thinking about how you leverage more internationally and stuff like that. Do you think at some point, like the acquisition exit, is that still something that's like underlying on the agenda that you'd love to achieve?
I think it depends what it is, mate, to be honest with you. Like there were some approaches that we got, and they've all been different in their own right. But, I think what I know is that even with, even without the structure and the right people and stuff, we've built something that people want. And, I think 4 out of the 8 have got to like an actual concrete, here's an offer, here's what we'd give you. Now it's, it wasn't life-changing amount of money in terms of I wasn't going to, sail off into the sunset and buy a yacht with it, but it was life-changing enough that it would have done something for me. But I look at it and think, well, one, I'm just basically giving over my business for, all right, a decent chunk of change, but I'm back working for somebody, and then I lose all control of that, which I don't want to do. But what I do know now is that people want it. And if we just continue doing what we're doing and do it better, then it's going to only become more valuable. So I think I've gotten to that point where I know that we could sell it because I've already had offers to sell it as it is. It's not going to get any worse than it is now, if I'm being really candid. In the future, if that means that someone wants to come in and give me a big chunk of change for it to, walk away after a couple of years, if the number's right and it's the right business, then who knows? But like we've discussed many times before, like even if someone came in and said, "Here's 10 million quid," what would I do then? I'd probably just have to go and do something else. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, mate. But I think the opportunity is there to do it, which is the important thing.
Yeah, and just keep building something you enjoy doing and you feel like you're motivated by, and then if something's valuable to sell, it's valuable enough to probably work in. That's what most people don't think about as well. Yeah. So, mate, look, 3rd time on, 1st time in person. Thanks so much. I think people should be, taking notice of what you've done. And I'm excited to see. We'll get you back on in the future and see where you're at.
Yeah. We're good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you as always for listening to today's show. I truly hope that you got value from it. Honestly, it's the only reason I take time every week to ensure that my audience, you guys, future and existing recruitment owners, you're learning from each other to make this industry that I love so much stronger. And today's episode is brought to you by my business, Hoxo. I'm the CEO and founder, and we're on a mission to help brand recruitment agencies and their people better. I want to help people have the tools to stand out in the most competitive markets in the world. So I'll see you again next week with another episode. Catch you soon.